for 23-24, all of the key performance indicators set out and approved by the board were achieved, if not exceeded.
How? Catherine Tate was back at committee today, and from what we've heard, it was such a barn burner that she was playing the victim card and accusing the Conservatives of vilifying her. We're pretty sure she can accomplish that all on her own.
Let's take a look.
Ms. Tate, you were asked to appear before this committee with very specific parameters in the motion surrounding bonuses, or as was referred to by your organization as performance pay. In the fiscal year covering 2022-2023, Ms. Tate, did you receive a bonus?
No.
Is there, now, it's my understanding that, thank you, being direct on that. Now, it is my understanding that there is not a deadline when it comes to there being a bonus awarded outside of a fiscal year. Is that your understanding as well?
That is everybody's understanding. Because, you know, this is Tate. So here's the thing. You may or may not be surprised that the government isn't always on time when paying bonuses.
You don't say.
Especially when it actually comes to the agency heads. I am aware of certain cases where agency heads hadn't received their bonus for 2 or 3 years. So she may be correct in saying, I didn't receive a bonus. The actual question should be, are you to receive a bonus, or were you to receive a bonus, or had you qualified for a bonus for fiscal year 22-23? So that's the magical question that should be asked here. So that's just a little inside knowledge.
Well, and I love how, I mean, the witnesses know what's being asked of them, but because it's not phrased correctly, they're able to get around giving a proper answer.
Yeah.
Mr. Goldblum, did the board request to the government that Ms. Tate receive a bonus?
The board provides its assessment of the CEO's performance, and we share that with the government. It's for the government to decide whether or not it pays a performance pay.
And did the board give the assessment that Ms. Tate should receive a bonus to the government?
I think the specifics of that recommendation is confidential, but I would say the board has been very supportive of Ms. Tate's performance.
So, thank you, Mr. Goldblum. So Ms. Tate, I would ask again, and it's my understanding that your term will be coming to a close. I believe January 3rd is the end of that. Now, in terms of performance pay, bonuses, and a severance package, we are in a situation where Canadians are struggling. The cost of living is making it unaffordable for so many Canadians to afford the essentials. Yet, when you look at the bonuses, $18 million awarded across CBC, including averaging tens of thousands of dollars to executives within the organization, yet your metrics certainly don't seem to add up with the talking points that are provided. As you conclude your tenure at CBC, can you commit today that you will not take a severance package or bonuses for the last 2 fiscal years?
You've made several points in that question. What I would say is, first of all, if we're talking about 22-23, all the results of that year are public. For 23-24, all of the key performance indicators set out and approved by the board were achieved, if not exceeded.
Say what?
I'm sorry. I need Pierre. I need him right now.
What the hell are they thinking over there?
How?
Wait a minute. Wait. Okay, so the only thing that I can think of that where this actually makes sense is that they set out to fire like 600 people.
Well, that's it. Like, the company is doing so poorly it has to lay off hundreds of people, but the board is doing so great that they all got bonuses?
I'm dumbfounded.
This makes no sense.
I
think we're just sitting here shocked.
And
Like,
she's saying that proudly, by the way.
This is where our tax dollars are going, folks.
Okay, and we're just getting started.
Thank you. So with respect, Ms. Tate, I did ask specifically about your compensation. So when the range of compensation that is provided, you make more than the Prime Minister of this country. That's your compensation. So to get a bonus on top of that at a time when viewership is down, ad revenue for your organization is down, I asked specifically about whether or not you would refuse to take a severance package at the conclusion of your term as CEO.
I believe that Canadians would expect that the corporation honor its commitments to its non-unionized employees as it would to its unionized employees, and I would just correct the record. Whereas total ad revenues are down, digital ad revenues are up since the beginning of my tenure, which digital revenue was at about 38 million. This last year it clocked in at about 100 million. So I think it's important that we have accurate descriptors of what's going on at CBC Radio-Canada.
So Ms. Tate, you said that it's confidential, that information, but that just doesn't work for Canadians. Canadians look at $18 million awarded in bonuses, the fact that you just spent $1,000 a night for a hotel room in Paris during the Olympics, and we are in a situation where you are coming to the conclusion of your term being paid more than the Prime Minister of this country makes, and you refuse today to rule out that you will receive either bonuses or so-called performance pay or a severance package at the conclusion of your term.
So this is what, unfortunately, I'm not going to say unfortunately, in the private sector, what executives sometimes will do is they will negotiate a exit clause. You know, should they not be renewed or should they be terminated, asked to leave, or anything like that. And, you know, it's basically a guaranteed sum of money should that happen. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry, actually. That is reprehensible to actually have happen in a public organization that is paid taxpayer money. So for this lady to just end her term, right? It's not like she's being fired.
I mean, they know that they're 5-year terms. They know that at the end of that 5 years, they're either going to renew their term for another 5, or they're going to leave and do something else. Like, they know when that 5 years is coming.
Yeah, it's not like it's unexpected.
No.
Right?
Sometimes it is. Sometimes the new government will come in and be like, okay, we're replacing all the executives at the top of all our crown corporations. We're bringing in the people that we want to run them. But in this case, it's not. This case, it is not a surprise. She knows that her time is up. It sounds like January 3rd of 2025.
And you're going to get a severance package.
Gross.
It's confidential, doesn't cut it for Canadians. It doesn't cut it for parliamentary oversight. So again, I ask, will you specifically today share with this committee whether or not you will refuse a severance package or bonus at the conclusion of your term as President and CEO of CBC?
As I've said, I consider that to be a personal matter. And I believe I'm protected by the Privacy Act in that regard.
So Ms. Tate, taxpayers pay your salary, as they do for all of us, and you can Google an MP's salary, you can Google the Prime Minister's salary. But here we are discussing $18 million paid out to bonuses, $3 million paid out to executives. Madam Tate, your own documents show that there are 631 managers at CBC. 43, I believe it is, executives. And you're defending those, the average bonus paid out to executives at your organization is more than most Canadians make in a year, and you're claiming that it's confidential? Madam Speaker, Madam Chair, through you, I would suggest that it is unbelievable that Ms. Tate would come before this committee with a very specific motion outlining that answers are demanded when it comes to the compensation received by a public broadcaster. These are taxpayers' dollars that are paying for this organization. So, again, I will ask and emphasize, Ms. Tate, at the conclusion of your term, whether it's for previous fiscal year's bonuses or so-called performance pay,
30 seconds.
or the conclusion of a severance package, will you refuse that out of respect for the taxpayers that have paid for you to have this role over the last number of years?
I believe I've answered the question, and for the record, I would like to correct some of the errors, in fact, that the member has articulated. One, this $18 million in performance pay is not, these are not dollars that aren't agreed upon well in advance of the end of the fiscal year. We have a rigorous process in place, a process that has been in place for 20 years.
Just because you know the maximum bonus amount doesn't mean they're agreed upon. Like, yeah, you're budgeting for them should you achieve the targets. That's one thing. Every organization does that, Tate. In some cases, organizations, they'll look at, okay, let me put it this way. The fiscally accountable organizations.
So not government organizations.
What they will do is they will get to the end of the year and they'll say, all right, everybody, how much money do we have? Oh, we have less money than last year? Okay, I guess we have less money to go around then. Well, the people that achieved, X amount, they're only going to get this year. Or they'll say, all right, everybody, here's the total amount of money you have to play with. Have at her. Spread it out in your departments, allocate it accordingly. Off you go. But they don't decide at the beginning of the year, well, so now no matter how bad we do, we're still going to pay everybody the same.
Well, and Tate's point is completely moot because this is taxpayer money. If you guys were self-sufficient and not taking over $1 billion from the Canadian taxpayer, then you could do what you want with your money. But the fact is that we're all footing the bill for this.
Well, and this is the problem the Canadians have with the CBC, because they can do as poor as they like, but we're still giving them $1.3 billion in government funding every year, and they can lose money like out the ass apparently, and it doesn't matter because they still get to function with no issues. And in this case, they actually fired 200 people and I believe didn't hire another couple hundred people that were actually slated to be hired in these positions. So they eliminated hundreds and hundreds of positions. And then they said, oh, but we exceeded all our targets.
Well, and being a taxpayer and being upset about this is one thing. It's totally valid. But can you imagine if you were one of those employees that got laid off and found out that all the executives were still getting their bonuses? And some of these bonuses are like $50,000 plus. I think Tate's is usually $100,000 plus. That's at least the salary of one employee, maybe two.
Sure. For sure. And no doubt part of the targets had to do with reducing operating expenses. Well, the best way to do that is to eliminate staff. And that's exactly what they did.
Madam Chair, it's a process that is similar to that of other Crown corporations, other government agencies, and most private companies. A process that is guided by third-party consultants that advise us, experts that advise us on what it is we should be paying our executives and our managers.
And how much did those third-party consultants cost?
Mr. Kurek, your time is up.
I wish we would have gotten that question. Okay, so you pay third-party to consultants to tell you how much you should pay your own people.
Have you ever been in an organization that does that?
Not that I'm aware.
Like, that's
what you have HR people for.
Right. And they know how to do like market assessments and stuff to say, okay, well, entry-level coder is paid this much, or entry-level HR person is paid this much.
If you need a third party to come in and tell your executives how much they should be paying themselves, here's an idea. Fire your executives and get executives to actually know what the heck they're doing.
Thank you very much. Ms. Tate, in an email obtained by the media through an access to information request, you wrote that the defund the CBC movement is gaining momentum, and it is true. Whether it's the Liberals whose threats of a 3% cut across the board led you to shrink your workforce to smaller than it was under Stephen Harper's years, or the Conservatives who've made it very clear they want to destroy the CBC. Canadians want to depend on the CBC. For us in the NDP, it is clear we need the CBC. We need a strong public broadcaster. However, not in the way that you're putting it forward. Under your leadership, executive bonuses are up while job cuts have been endemic. When asked about whether or not you regret the almost $20 million in executive bonuses this year while simultaneously cutting jobs, you said you don't, quote, live in regret, unquote, which I'm sure is cold comfort for the workers who lost their jobs and may no longer be able to live in actual homes. Will you acknowledge that your actions, CBC's actions to dole out $18 million in bonuses, has hurt CBC's reputation?
If I may, Madam Chair, there are a couple of points there I would like to correct. One is that executive bonuses or performance pay is up. The average is more or less the same as it has been in the last 10, 15 years. Let's be clear. The average across 1,000 employees is about $15,000. Number two, that the more jobs have been lost under my tenure. I would point out that over the last 6 years, 90 positions have been lost to the public broadcaster. Every job lost is very, very hard. Over the previous 10 years, 1,085 jobs were lost. So let us be clear, to paint a picture that CBC, Radio-Canada, is somehow cutting jobs in a heartless fashion. This is not true.
I thought there was a couple hundred jobs lost. Is that incorrect? Or is she just talking about like net jobs?
The problem is I don't believe a word she says anymore. The data that we received is that they laid off something like 204 actual people and didn't fill a couple hundred more jobs after that, upwards that amounted to around 600. So that's what we had actually seen in some news articles. Now, I don't know what she's talking about, 90. That doesn't really make a lot of sense unless they fired a bunch of people in the last fiscal, which ends in March 31st, and then they hired a bunch of people back. And so she's trying to say, oh, well, that's okay. You know, we created some new positions. The issue is that last fiscal, you laid off all these people and eliminated all of these positions and then paid yourself bonuses. Like even the NDP is calling her on her crap.
Yeah, because the NDP are supposed to be, you know, pro-union, pro-worker.
For the workers. Yeah. And in this case, I agree with them. I was at a previous organization, not this one, but I was at a previous organization where I was laid off so executives could get bonuses.
Yeah, it was a really tough time for the family, and
it was a private organization. It sucked, but that's business, especially in private. You know, it is what it is. You know, you suck it up and you keep going. But when you're talking about a public organization, taxpayer dollars, I view that differently. And I also view it differently when, you know, they're basically saying, well, you know, I don't have to disclose that. Well, it's public. You make more than the Prime Minister. And, you know, she's sitting there, you know, crowing about how we met all our targets, even though our organization sucks. We're hemorrhaging money, but we met all our targets. You know what that says?
They set low targets.
Exactly. And it's just as much on the board as it is on them because the board approves the targets.
Well, it's like, you know, if I set a goal for myself, well, I'm going to count to 20. Obviously, I can do that. I can do that quite easily, right?
Congratulations. You've earned your $15,000 bonus.
Yay.
During the pandemic, we were clear.
With all due respect, Ms. Tate, the question is about something that you have been on the record, certainly internally, as saying your concerns around the defund the CBC movement. Are you concerned that your actions, CBC's actions to dole out $18 million in bonuses, is contributing to the attacks on the CBC and, frankly, playing in the hands of conservatives that want nothing less to do the CBC, to cut the CBC, while the rest of us believe we need a strong public broadcaster? Will you acknowledge that your actions are contributing to the attacks on the CBC?
I would say that the fact that my actions have contributed, as you're describing, is irrelevant. What would be more disturbing for Canadians is if the CBC's management and board of directors did not act in a way that was independent and fiscally responsible. We had commitments to over 1,000 employees, and we met those commitments. We heard the concerns, and we have taken action and ordered a third-party review of our compensation policies. Beyond that, I cannot see how else we could respond without having, quite frankly, cause Canadians to be concerned about the true independence of their public broadcaster.
Ms. Tate, when we talk about the role of a public broadcaster, we need to talk about its mandate. You're not Bell Media, which we had in front of this committee and who made it very clear that they were putting profit ahead of local journalism. CBC has an obligation to ensure that regions across our country, including Northern Canada, have the voices it deserves. No better example of the damage that's been caused is the deeply cynical treatment of the CBC position here in Northern Manitoba. Last time you came to our committee, you mentioned how pleased you were that the CBC had filled the position. What was not known to us was that it had been filled for 2 months as a secondment. We no longer have anybody here after years of not having anybody here.
Wow. So, okay, so what that means is Ashton is saying that, well, the last time that Tate was at committee, they're like, well, where's our CBC person here in Northern Manitoba? And Tate's like, oh, we filled that position, no problem. And so what Ashton is saying, you filled that via secondment, basically means they took an existing person at CBC, shipped them up to Manitoba for 2 months to say they filled the position, and then they brought them back. And then they went back to their old job.
Wow.
Just so they could say they filled the position at committee. This lady is a viper.
CBC's mandate is to ensure that somebody services CBC North Country. This means that 85,000 people across Manitoba no longer have a voice through the CBC and haven't had one for years. I contrast that with the leadership of Hubert Lacroix, the previous president, with whom I worked. He listened to our communities. He listened to people saying that we needed a CBC voice and made sure that our station stayed open. Under your leadership, we've seen the opposite, and a cynical play in last committee meeting to say that you filled the position when in fact it was only for a couple of months. So my question is, what were the bonuses for? Where is the commitment to regional broadcasting when regions like ours are back to being a media desert when it comes to the CBC? What are the bonuses for exactly when you're not fulfilling the mandate that the CBC has in terms of regional broadcasting? And why should Canadians believe that the CBC matters when you consistently leave regions like ours in the dark?
Well, Nikki Ashton, this is why Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are saying, we're fed up with the CBC, we're done.
And you know what? Canadians are starting to say the exact same thing, especially young Canadians. We're not finding value in the CBC. I mean, what is my tax money paying for?
Well, and I understand the concern from people, that are saying, well, we need an organization, a news organization in these remote parts of Canada, and that's what the CBC is supposed to do. But evidently that model isn't working. And when it comes to this type of thing, you also have Bell and Shaw Communications, well, / Rogers now, and TELUS. Like that's basically all you have. You have these media conglomerates in Canada, and there is no competition between them because it's a backroom handshake about territory division, and that's it. So that's one of the big problems in Canada is there is no competition.
Right.
And these guys aren't forced to innovate. They're not forced to keep the prices low. They all have the similar prices. And then when the technology improves, they all say, okay, everybody, we're going to one-up it now. And then they all do it at the same time.
But they're starting to get threatened by shows like Northern Perspective, where just everyday Canadians are talking about the news, talking about politics, talking about things they see. And Canadians are starting to listen because Canadians are fed up with traditional media like the CBC. We're tired of the bias.
Right. And, you know, at least on Northern Perspective, we tell you we lean conservative. We don't say we don't and then we lean conservative. Like, at least
we don't pretend.
At least we're honest about it, but we also try to be fair. And if the Conservatives are doing something dumb, then we will call it out. And if the Liberals are actually doing something good, we will call it out.
But I don't think I've seen that yet.
There's just not that many things that the Liberals have done. So anyway, this is what it is. So I think what we need in Canada is far more competition. And and what the government should be doing is incentivizing competition.
Oh, absolutely. There was a solution that I had read. It was more in terms of print media. But the point being, it's that instead of subsidizing newspapers or news websites directly, they should charge a subscription to Canadian viewers, and Canadian viewers can then submit for a tax refund on when they do their tax returns. So it's really the Canadians who are choosing which organization to spend their money on, and they're the ones getting the tax breaks directly instead of the government choosing who gets the money.
Yeah, and I think that's a phenomenal idea because that would dramatically increase competition, and it would force these media agencies to actually do their jobs.
I'm not sure what the question is, Madam Chair.
35 seconds.
Well, the question is, what were the bonuses for if you're failing when it comes to regional broadcasting?
1,000 hours of local news audio were delivered this past year. That's with 7,000 hours per day of video and audio distributed across this country. 450 news articles are published daily. 50% of those come from locations like Thompson, Manitoba. Yes, we filled the position, and the person made up the personal decision to move back to live with her partner. That job is up for hire again. It is very difficult for us to find people in those regions, but we're working hard on it. I'll remind you that during my tenure, we added journalists in Lethbridge, in Cranbrook, in Nanaimo, and in Kingston, Ontario. We have limited resources. We know that for CBC,
please wrap up your answer.
I make over $400,000 a year.
I think it's over 500.
We have limited resources.
I'm pretty sure we had looked up her salary last time.
It was a range. It was like between 4 and 6 or something like that.
Yeah, it was insane. Like Keurig said, it's more than the Prime Minister.
And then you have the gall to turn around and say, we have limited resources.